addressed tonight was, did the EIR actually look at all of the things it was supposed to look at?
If you narrowly define things
well,
like
that's
that,
the
you
law.
can say yes,
I can't change that.
I looked at it, but the DEIR did make some kind of recommendation that there would be least environmental damage in a particular
It said that in a lot of other things, but that's not the issue tonight that the city planning commission is looking at.
However,
you're not supposed to.
However, that qualitatively affects the outcome. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think all you can do is...
I'm sorry, I'm going to back up, but maybe you can sort this out, but this seems to be...
You're going to have to put your case for the council if at the point that it gets to the council.
Yeah. Nobody's disagreeing that your issues are real. What they're saying is this is not the time or place to address those issues. This body doesn't look at them. The only thing they're looking at is, and you've already put before them, the fact was in the draft environmental impact report. The comments were out there. The experts have said we looked at the comments and we commented on them. That's all the law requires this body to decide tonight, is that they actually looked at and responded to the comments. Not do you like them or not like them? Is that a good place to be? I know it's confusing, and actually, to answer your first question, they don't have to have a public hearing on this issue at all. So the fact that they're having one, they didn't need to notice anybody because they didn't have to have a public hearing. But all that was legally required was 24 hours notice, or 72 hours notice of the regular meeting was noticed before. And I think we tried to give as much notification to the public as possible. So that's the best we could do.
Okay, but on the other hand, take a counter argument to yours. I think the issue is before us, and I think we have a responsibility to determine not only the adequacy, but also the accuracy of the comments, as well as any information that was left out.
In a broad sense, yes, but please remember, I was reading from California Supreme Court cases that say you're not talking about perfect or correctness. You're talking about...
That refers to the report itself, but if there's information in the report that this lady takes exception to as being inaccurate, the commission, I think, can judge that.
If the issue is raised that something is inaccurate, as opposed to I don't like it, then specify how it is inaccurate, which I haven't heard yet.
Okay, she is
well, that was a glaring inaccuracy because prior to a public comment that the existence of the medical bill was left out.
You're not going to convince town attorney, and I think we've heard you. I think we understand what you're trying to say, and that there is certainly a question in your mind as to the adequacy and accuracy of the comments on.
Right, and also the adequacy and accuracy of them sticking to their original conclusions when all these really serious questions were raised. I just don't see how this final EIR could be so accurate because they kept their same conclusions.
So you're actually pointing out the inaccuracy of
just one of them, but there were so many.
But I think well, we'll see what happens tonight. But
Thank you.
You're better off to
make
your point. No, you're better off to make your point to the council. We can recommend, and we can ask for further information of this nature, but we really aren't the ones that are going to make.
Unfortunately, our council is very biased and unresponsive. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else? If not, I will close the public hearing, and we'll have a discussion among the commissioners with possible action. I think you've been given by staff what we can do, what possible alternatives are for your consideration. I'll go to my right, and I'll call upon Phil.
Well, I had some words written which will have to be modified because of what the city attorney pointed out is close enough. I read the response to the comments document and the draft EIR revisions. Planning Commission is requested to recommend to the town council to accept the document as it is, being relatively true, relatively accurate, or relatively genuine. But however, I believe the EIR is flawed in many ways because the basic foundation for the project is flawed. The basic library community numbers established by the San Mateo Library and its consultants is 15,174, while the Atherton Library cardholders number something like 9,846. But no investigation has been made on the cardholder use or the cardholder location. That is, how many of these people are alive that held the cards, and where do they live? If they're using the cards, where do they come from? Because when I check out a book, they know exactly where I checked it out, what it is, and where I live. So this relates to the overall library size and the discussion on traffic and parking. While the master response number 1 says that it can only evaluate the proposal as submitted, not the underlying flawed needs assessment. In my view, the FEIR is based on flawed foundation and is really not that true and not that accurate because of that. I would like to have had LSA examine the cardholder data for the use. How many are really in service with the Atherton Library? Where are these active cardholders located? This information could have resulted in solid, meaningful population numbers in traffic generation and propagation data. I don't know where the numbers came for the traffic numbers. There's been very little comment on the FEIR or the draft EIR on rail traffic, Caltrain or high-speed rail. The effects on rail crossing, the safety, noise, and noise methods of noise mitigation. The FEIR should have more adequately addressed this issue. LSA has produced a very expensive and comprehensive document, but the basic foundation is not there, and therefore it may be close enough, but in my view, it's not accurate enough. Thank you.
Paul?
I have a couple questions. I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to ask them at the beginning, comment now.
This is going to be your last chance.
Ask them now. So I understand that, if we're talking about the intersection of El Camino and Watkins, I understand that basically, I forget the exact rendition of words, but it's substandard right now. It will get worse, but the conclusion is it's still substandard. It was substandard before, it will be substandard after. And I do understand that it would be that case whether there were mitigation measures or not. And there was this discussion about the right turn lane and whether that was possible or not. What about a light? I mean, I think the mitigation measure at the other end, the problem was solved by, quote, putting in a light. So I know there's a lot of discussion about the right turn lane, but why isn't the same mitigation measure used at the other end?
We did look at the addition of the traffic signal as possible mitigation, but the issue with that is that you're on a Caltrans facility. And so therefore, the town cannot ensure that a traffic signal would be installed. Or I should say, the town can't ensure that any improvements could be installed within Caltrans right away. And so therefore, the town could choose to pursue that as a mitigation. However, we can't be assured that mitigation would happen. And so therefore, for purposes of the EIR, we cannot say that that is absolutely a mitigation measure that will occur and is feasible, and so therefore we still have to call it significant and unavoidable impact. But like I said, it doesn't preclude the town from pursuing that.
Right, so you don't consider it because it's not completely within the control of the
we did consider it.
But you consider it, you raise it, but you cannot, we can't make Caltrans do anything. And since we can't make them, you can't rely on that as a mitigation measure. Because we can say that's what's going to fix this intersection, and we can tell Caltrans, you better do it. And, you know, if they want to spend the money on it, by the way, it has to be warranted, which Caltrans standard, they go out and do a traffic count, it can be totally different than ours. We're looking at future potential traffic. Caltrans looks at what's there today, and they go click, 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 and then they come back and say, it doesn't warrant a light, or it does. But then they decide whether they're going to put it in or not. But since we can't make them, it's not viewed as a real viable mitigation.
So it's, the report is not required to look at it further than to say it's not completely within our
it's
control,
deficient.
and therefore.
We did look at it, it's on page 25 of the response comments document, the data is there.
Right.
It says it's deficient, it will continue to be deficient.
So
There are
it's,
things that
it's another potential mitigation measure that the report looked at, and it would be up to the
we just
powers
can't
that be to
make
decide.
we just can't make Caltrans do it.
Okay. And there's so many pages, I don't know, maybe look at this as well, but I noticed in there that you took into account if there were people turning left from Watkins onto El Camino, that they could sort of go halfway and stop there one at a time, and then, you know, merge in when there's clearance the other way. It seems to me that another thing that people are likely to do is just turn right and do a U-turn. So did you analyze the effect of the U-turns at Walnut and the U-turns at Maple? Because if there's only, you can't get out very fast going left on.
Yeah, we did not look at the effect of the U-turns, but in terms of the effect of the left turns at Watkins and El Camino, that is a prohibited movement during the peak hours, which is when, the peak hours is what we analyze in the document.
Right, hence
And
people turn right and then do a U-turn, but then that means any left-hand turn from Walnut or Maple becomes that much more difficult because there's people waiting to do U-turns.
Well, that's correct.
But I didn't see an analysis of.
We didn't
of
analyze that, but the issue is that the left turn, okay, I guess I understand what you're saying. The deficiency is due to the left turns. So you're saying if we added the left turns to the right turns, then we would make other.
No, I'm just saying, what's the impact on Walnut and Maple of the traffic?
No, it was not analyzed, but again, that's an existing condition that if it were enforced, it's not an effect of the library, it's an effect of an existing condition that's occurring today. So we could analyze it, but again, the question becomes whether or not the library would exacerbate that impact.
Right.
Or I shouldn't say.
If it's a bad intersection that's getting worse, of course it's going
Yeah.
to exacerbate.
Paul, the question also would be, did somebody raise this as a comment that they could then have gone back and looked at and addressed? Because that's what the whole traffic environmental impact report was about.
Right, but you're also saying that what we're supposed to do is look at it and say, is there enough information in there to make a reasonable thing? And so I'm asking about issues that could raise that. If there's enough of those types of issues, then the answer could be, no, I don't think there's enough information in there.
Sure.
Or does it fall into the category of it's not perfect, so it doesn't have to have everything. So that's why I'm raising that issue.
I'm just trying to figure out, because it is still in the Caltrans purview of we can't make them do anything. So in the end, for using the close enough standard theoretically, you really have to discount everything that is in the Caltrans right of way because we can't control it. So you can't say the EIR is deficient because we didn't look at it and determine if that's going to be an environmental impact because we can't mitigate it anyway.
I'm not sure we can go that far.
Um,
Because then you could say if we're a small enough jurisdiction, we don't have to do EIRs because we can't control anything around it.
I can give you the citation that was thrown at us in the Facebook EIR, and I can give you the CEQA guidelines section that says if it's outside your jurisdiction, you really don't control it, it doesn't count. And that's outside our jurisdiction, it's a state highway, it really doesn't count. So, as unfair as that may seem, the city council, when they make their final decision, they can't look at that and say it needs to be mitigated and fixed because they can't make the state of California do it.
Yeah, but if I were a decision maker, I would at least want to have the information.
Certainly, I can't disagree with that. All I can tell you is what CEQA says.
Right. like the previous speaker, you go far enough, close enough means, you know,
Well,
you don't have to put very much in there because you can always make the argument about as close as
the statement that
I
means the most is an
Well, what-
EIR that is deficient in one respect may nevertheless be adequate when viewed in its entirety. So you're not looking at each individual thing unless it gets to be,
Right.
as a group, collectively, it's a problem.
Right. And that's why
Which
we're
is-
trying to raise things and finding out whether they're in there or not.
Okay, okay, let's go, do you have any further discussion at this time?
I'm not sure that it's worthwhile. It's just
Oh,
a bunch
it
of,
is.
it's just a bunch of additional little things that I'm not sure were adequately addressed, but I seem to be getting the guidance that it's all gonna be lumped together.
Let me make sure you understand, that the only guidance that I've given you had to do with El Camino Real, that's a state highway, where we have no jurisdiction. It's a little bit like federal preemption. This is state preemption, and we can't tell them what to do, so when it comes to CEQA, a state law, they pretty much take themselves out of the picture and say, don't tell us what to do. But if you want to look at it in terms of a potential problem, that might, the point being, it might help somebody say no to a project. I get that. The problem is, we still can't fix it. So,
But at the same time, powers, the council, should take these particular items that are close enough into account in making their final decision. All right, Paul, do you have anything further?
Okay, I'm gonna ask another question about something that, as to whether it's in there. So increased traffic, like foot traffic in the park, was there an analysis of how that would impact the park? You know, it's an open space. To use extreme examples, if you brought in 100,000 people, they destroy the park. So if you brought in one person, they're not gonna have any impact on the park. Was there analysis of, given the amount of foot traffic that is going to be brought into the park by having a library there, how is that going to affect the rest of the park?
The Parks and Recreation section in the draft EIR talks about increased use of the park, so that would be more vehicles, more foot traffic, and that kind of thing, and determined that there would be no significant impact, that the park would not experience such a substantial increase in use that facilities there would deteriorate. So that was addressed.
Christine?
All right, well, so my understanding of the process is that at some point, the EIR was put together by LSA based on a program for the library that was put together by the Atherton Library Building Steering Committee. It was approved by the council. The council asked LSA to provide this document based on that. My understanding is that we don't comment on the program. We don't comment on the things that went into the making of the EIR. Strictly, does the EIR assess the impacts of what was given to them? Additionally, there was a public hearing that we held here. People made comments, and I understand that tonight we are strictly looking at the comments that were made and were they addressed adequately. I don't think we're bringing up additional, comments at this meeting. I said at the previous meeting, I felt the EIR was, well done. There are additional letters and comments that were in here. I think most of them are not substantive. Many of them comment on things that are beyond the purview of the EIR, such as where should the library go. So given what I understand to be the constraints and parameters of what we're looking at, I think that EIR successfully looks at the myriad issues associated with the library in whatever location it goes, assesses whether or not there are impacts and when there are, offers options of mitigation. So, those are my comments.
William?
I've read the same, and there's a great number of thoughts given by citizens as well as government officials, and there's a modicum of purple prose in here, but within the confines of a direction from council and the EIR process, I find it reasonably adequate to recommend to the council.
Okay, my feelings are perhaps the opposite. Not perhaps, are the opposite. I'd asked the question in regard to the service area. This is over 15,000 people, or more than half of Atherton. And the reason I asked that question and asked for further wordage on it is the routes that these people would take, because obviously it's the intersections that are going to be affected. I see nowhere in here that you've actually defined where the out-of-town areas are located, so that one could look at it and determine what routes might be taken, not from leaving the library, but from their homes to get there. After all, the library is a little bit like a retail store, a destination type retail store. Its success is going to be measured by the number of people that use it. And if it's located in a spot that people find difficult to get to or go from, it's not going to be successful. It will be a white elephant. And I don't think that the EIR adequately addresses the issues of where the people are coming from and the routes that they're going to take. So therefore, I could not vote in that the EIR and recommend to the council that the EIR be certified. I would like to see the authors of the report deal with some of these questions, which they haven't done, and would even offer a continuance, another month or so to give them. Or I could vote no on the certification, that I would recommend that the council not certify the EIR. Well, with that, Commission, what do you want to do?
So what's, in terms of process, as I understood it, I mean, are we a required part of this process?
No, this was,
So if we, no matter what we do, city council could take up the matter and do whatever it's going to do. They simply, as a matter of whatever. Courtesy, advice, have.
You asked for it.
They sent it,
Okay,
they
yeah.
sent it back to you because you asked for it. They said, sure, and this is your opportunity to comment however you want and send it back to them. It's not yours to continue or do anything else with. It's to recommend to them how it should be handled.
And if we decided to recommend against it, it would still go up there and get certified. So it's not
Yes.
like we're
Yes.
a required cognitive.
Mhm.
The bill, the staff report says for action, an alternative would be for the Planning Commission to request further study or analysis by the environmental consultant.
But because of the process that we use, that request would have to go to the city council for them to say, yes, that's a good idea, or no. And the net effect, and by the way, that is the standard procedure if you were going to take final action on an EIR. That's not what this is doing this time. This was, you know, with all due respect to the planners, that is the standard language that would be out there. But in this case, really, your duty is to recommend to the city council thumbs up or thumbs down on adequacy of the EIR covering the issues that they were supposed to cover.
Well, in other words, we're basically saying this is a charade.
Well,
We are, might as well be dummies here.
no,
And
I think actually it's just the opposite. The whole concept was they wanted the public to have as much opportunity to see the document, to express it. They wanted you to weigh in as to how you view the adequacy of the EIR, and because you asked, and then it will go back to them with your recommendation, regardless if you say yes or no. And at that point in time, it'll be up to the city council to decide whether ultimately to certify it. because you're not being asked to certify, you're just being asked to comment on adequacy.
Well, then why was this alternative put into the report?
I would call it a mistake. And not one that I would suggest is surprising because of the process that you asked the city council to give you the opportunity. It's just like we did this as a public hearing. It's not required legally at all to hear from the public. It could have come to you and you could have commented on it and could have gone off to the city council. They suggested it be a public hearing. So, I mean, the process that we're using is not what I would consider the off-the-rack, one-size-fits-all kind of a process. This was a kind of a special thing where you have the opportunity to comment about the things that you feel are adequate or inadequate.
Without appearing that this is being railroaded through. Thank you. Okay, we've heard from the town council. We've heard, I would gather that we cannot continue this hearing to another time to ask the authors of the EIR to come back with answers to the questions.
No, but you could recommend to the city council that they answer further questions that you believe are pertinent to be answered. And they can decide whether to send it back to you or to just hear the answers themselves if they agree with you.
But further, your comment is more about the basis for the EIR and not of the process of the EIR. But a fundamentally different question or issue is, I believe, that is part of our work.
Well, my question with regard to the areas that are in the service area is fundamental to the very traffic patterns they talk about. If we don't know where the cars are coming from, how do we decide that the intersection is going to be such and such a number?
Mr. Chairman, with all respect, please understand that the way that the library JPA is set up, that the service area includes outside of our own city jurisdiction. Because of that, just like Caltrans Highway, we can't go out and make Atherton, Menlo Park, or the county do anything. So usually, an EIR doesn't study far out reaches outside of your own jurisdiction because you can't make anybody do anything. So even if we had studied somebody coming from the county region somewhere out near Menlo Park, even if we knew where they were coming from, the problem is that the only thing that we asked the traffic analysis to look at was once it hit our jurisdiction, what were the impacts going to be that we could impact and mitigate? Not, how about San Francisco and then start intersectioning down closer and closer?
Well, I don't want to argue further on the point, but let's say it's West Menlo is part of the service area. The only way, just like West Atherton, for you to get down to Watkins is either you, for most cases, is to go down Atherton Avenue, turn south on El Camino, and make that left-hand turn into oncoming traffic. And I think the EIR has a responsibility to point out the danger of that particular turn. It becomes very unattractive to many families, including myself, to try to make that turn in heavy traffic. And thus, anybody that's going to locate a building with that sort of impediment against it, it's got to face that they're not going to get the output of people that they could in another more prominent location.
But you do understand the EIR does look at that intersection. That's the point.
Yes, but the point is, how does one look at those numbers? Unless you know what routes they're figuring. I heard that they were taking it from the library going out.
That's true.
And the point I'm trying to make is if you do know what the service area is, that you should figure the routes to the library, wherever it's located. So, with that, we can probably discuss it all night. Or longer. And what does the commission wish to do?
Well, there's a motion in here at the back end that says something as it stands, and I'm not doing this, I'm just reading. I move the planning commission recommend city council certification of final EIR for the Atherton Library building, and the city council, I'm reading again, certify that 1, 2, and 3. The final EIR has been completed in compliance with CEQA. I guess that part's been done. It has been done that way. The FEIR reflects the lead agency's independent judgment and analysis. And 3, the FEIR was presented to the decision-making body, which reviewed and considered the information in the FEIR before approving the project. But if we modify that to say, recommend the city council review the final EIR and add a couple of comments that we think additional studies could be made on traffic, on Watkins and Middlefield, the sources of the traffic based on card user data, and a couple of comments like that.
Sure.
Maybe that's the way we ought to go.
That sounds like a reasonable approach to me.
It's an approach, it may not be the only one.
I think it's a reasonable approach.
Okay, if you wish to,
All right?
All right, go Phil.
If I think I can do it again?
I don't know. Just
All right.
have your,
Let's try it. Let's try this.
Consider
You can always amend motions. I move that the planning commission recommends city council acceptance of the final EIR for the Atherton Library building project, and that the city council accept the planning commission recommendation that the final EIR has been completed in compliance with CEQA, and that 2, the FEIR reflects the lead agency's independent judgment and analysis, and 3, the FEIR was presented to the decision-making body which reviewed and considered the information in the FEIR before approving the project. In addition, the Planning Commission recommends that further study be made of the Watkins-El Camino intersection, and that signalization along Middlefield be reviewed, and that the sources of traffic be analyzed using Atherton Library cardholder data.
do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it with I just want a couple clarifications about what we're saying. Because, for example, the FEIR was presented to the decision-making body. We're not a decision-making body.
No, those 3, that's, you're recommending to them that they make those, because by law, they have to make those, period. You cannot change that language.
The council's.
So we're recommending that they do this
Yes.
stuff. We're not saying
Yes.
it's been, that this stuff has actually been done.
No.
It says, recommend that the city council certify that,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, because that's what has to happen.
Okay,
when we're
that's fine, as long as
certifying.
we're not saying that we,
Yeah.
I changed that to the city council certify.
You said change it to acceptance.
I changed that to say, accept the planning commission's recommendation that the,
Correct.
but we're not recommending that
No, there's
those 3 things.
That's not your
That's
job.
what I mean.
Exactly.
I agree with your recommendations underneath, and that they consider those 3 things, but we're not saying that that's the
No.
case.
the recommendation.
Well, if you look at those 3 things, they're sort of not relevant to what you're doing tonight. Basically,
Well, that's why I'm
Yeah.
wondering why they're in our.
because that's the legalese that has to be in their final certification.
So that's fine, as long as we're not saying that those 3 things are true. Then I'll-
That's right.
Then I would second the motion.
It doesn't say anything about truth or falsity of anything in the EIR at all. It just says it's certified that it's independently done.
And I didn't use the words close enough.
Don't get it.
We're horseshoes.
Okay, we have a motion,
And it's been seconded.
and it has been seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? I vote against. The motion passes.
Now.
And I think the last item,
One more, we gotta do something about mitigation.
No, you don't have to take action on mitigation. That's kind of an FYI, I think that's what the city council is going to do. There'll be a mitigation monitoring plan.
Yes.
Well, wait a minute, there's a further motion in there, I further move the
Yes.
provide the following comments on the draft mitigation monitoring reporting program.
what?
What's in there, you represent. You want me to read this whole thing and comment? You can certainly comment on the the mitigation monitoring program if you feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, the only one, what I wanted to comment on NMP or whatever the place you call that thing, is that, I would only use, trans 1. I would not, use option trans 2, 3, or 4.
And you could make that a recommendation to the city council.
I would recommend that. That's my recommendation.
Trans 2, 3, and 4,
Yeah, only one.
5. Only one, Commissioner Whitely, not 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Really, they should add number 6, which is the right turn only, which is at least as infeasible as all the other options. It's in the document, but not in the summary.
Trans 5 has to do with parking.
I think that for purposes of a motion clarification, you're only recommending trans 1 regardless of however many of the others there might be. Because there's also 2 others.
And that's included in the motion.
That's the second, no, that's just, that's another motion.
Okay, and we have another motion before us by Phil.
Yeah.
Do we have a second to that motion?